This is the SF Productions Podcast Network.
Now is something we hope you really like.
From the Pop Culture Bunker, I'm Mindy.
And I'm Mark. You can check out our audio podcast, How I Got My Way Through Comics, on iTunes or on our website, sfpodcastnetwork.com. Well, Saturday morning cartoons and the death of the Saturday morning cartoon is such a huge topic, we couldn't get through it in one episode. So let's go back to the action. Super Friends! Now, Super Friends was huge for me, at least. And I distinctly remember as a kid, I'd go out and ride my bike on Saturday morning, and I was like, I had to check in my watch because I had to be home in time to see Super Friends. And there was a summer, I remember, we just played Super Friends most of the summer.
And who were you when you
Independent.
played? Oh, okay.
Independent. Somebody had to be the bad guy sometimes.
Somebody always had to be Aquaman.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. Oh, Aquaman. There was Shazam! And Shazam and Mighty Isis that eventually became a power hour there.
Not the terrorist group ISIS,
Not
but the superheroine ISIS.
ISIS, yes. Which took the concept from the comic books and turned it into old guy and a kid ride in an RV around the country, and they get involved in minor issues that for some reason you need a superhero for.
Exactly.
As morning moved into afternoon, we got into shows like American Bandstand.
You know, I never really watched American Bandstand. That may be why I'm not such a big, music fan anymore, but I always left the room when that came
By then,
on.
I was pretty much out.
Yeah.
The Monkees.
On the other hand, I loved the Monkees.
Yeah. You had the CBS Children's Film Festival. And this was an interesting show because they took shows actually from all over the world and showed these short films. And they interspersed it with shots of Kukla, Fran, and Ollie, the puppet group. I
think that's probably where I first saw, this weirdo Cinderella with... I remember that there was like a bird or something that kept saying, "Ooh, there's blood on the shoe," when they were trying to shoe on the prince, and other things, and the sister cut her toes off so it would fit in the shoe.
This is a kid's movie?
Yeah, I know. But I always wanted to go back and rewatch that now, but I really don't know what it was, except I'm pretty sure it was on that CBS Children's Film Festival.
It's probably on Netflix. I wouldn't be surprised. Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, that they tended to put that later in the morning or even in the early afternoon. And again, and a bit of a educational angle there to a little bit, at least teaching a lesson.
Teaching a lesson. Most of the time it was like, not really
don't
teaching
fight each
history,
other.
But it was teaching you socialization skills.
Right. Now, as I'm sure as we both got older, as most kids did, they would go, I've kind of lost interest in the whole cartoons thing.
I probably spent half the time watching cartoons and half the time reading a book because I was that girl, I liked books, but...
Now, I remember gravitating back during college in the 80s for particular shows. One was Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Right.
Which is just... If you've never seen it, it's bizarre.
It is bizarre, but it's also pretty good.
No, it's very good. I mean, you really should see it. And I'm sure, surely that's available somewhere streaming.
I think so.
I would bet.
It's DVDs
and then Mighty Mouse: The New Adventures. So this was Ralph Bakshi producing this, and a young John Kricfalusi, who went on to do Ren and Stimpy, did this show, and there's a lot of fourth wall stuff going on. And then a lot of things happened. You had video games appearing, starting in the late 70s, and that just went on. And that's a new distraction for kids, to the point where there are a lot of 80s cartoons Saturday morning based on video games.
Right.
Pac-Man had a show, and, because they're like, well, we got to get the kids in. The kids like video games. Let's just do cartoons based on video games. And then FCC rules were loosened, which allowed basically half-hour toy commercials, and they were disguised as cartoons.
Right.
AKA He-Man and Transformers and G.I. Joe.
And really, the original My Little Ponies, I think, were like that.
Yeah.
But,
Right. And cable came in, of course. Turner cornered the non-Disney market, just bought out the Warner Brothers library and bought all these other libraries and the Hanna-Barbera library, and created Cartoon Network in 1992 and Boomerang in 2000. And Boomerang is just, or at least at the time, I don't know what it is now, but at the time it was, let's just show the classic 60s cartoons.
Right.
Not to mention, of course, Disney Channel was cranking out shows. And both threw a lot of money toward better quality shows than the networks were willing to throw money at.
Right.
NBC and CBS dropped their cartoon blocks in the 90s, and then ABC dropped them around 2004.
Now, a lot of local stations might still show cartoons, or some cartoons, but it's all local.
Right. Some other things that happened, you had the NCAA football came in and started to encroach on that schedule just as the fall season would start. So new cartoons had it even harder to really get some purchase. Saved by the Bell showed that live action shows could work on Saturday morning.
I never watched
No, neither did I.
That was way after my time.
Yeah. And then, we had the networks expanding their morning shows into the weekends.
So, like, now we have the Today Show Saturday.
And, we have GMA Saturday.
Yeah.
And, so that's even more time being taken away. Now, what really was a major force is that the FCC began enforcing a rule where broadcast stations or networks had to offer 3 hours of educational programming per week. Now, they're not going to put this in prime time. And they also tightened up rules again in the 1990s, after loosening them in the 80s, about how much advertising you could do in the middle of a cartoon.
And how much of it would be, aimed at children.
Right.
They're saying, you can't really advertise to kids.
Right. And so they chose to do these educational shows on Saturday morning. And you see these that had a rating of EI, that's educational and instructional. Now, these were quasi-educational. The rules are very loose for what's considered educational. But it created very boring shows that no kid was interested in watching.
They could have done good things. We loved Schoolhouse Rock growing up. Everybody loved Schoolhouse Rock. That was educational.
Yeah.
No.
And, of course, the toy and the cereal companies, they started spending their money outside of Saturday morning because you had Cartoon Network now.
Yeah.
And that cut the main source of ad revenue for the networks, because it was toys and cereal. That was it.
And I think that we're starting to see now some of them are going back to, like, Netflix to create their series about their toys. So.
Yeah. And, of course, today, you've got this huge plethora of options. You've got cable, you've got streaming, you've got DVDs.
So
you got games on their phone. There's so many other things to attract kids' attention.
Right. Well, you could now, as a parent or whatever, you can say, I don't want my kids watching that stuff, and you stick in their favorite Disney movie or whatever, and that keeps them occupied for a good hour and a half or whatever.
Right.
So
Saturday morning cartoons, we hardly knew ye.
Yeah. Sorry. You can check out our audio podcast, How I Got My Wife to Read Comics, on iTunes, or on our website, sfpodcastnetwork.com. From the Pop Culture Bunker, I'm Mindy.
And I'm Mark. Thanks for watching.